16, 50, 18. Those aren't lottery numbers. Those are Brady Anderson's home run totals in 3 consecutive seasons. 16 in 1995, 50 in 1996, and 18 in 1997. If you saw that in a spreadsheet, you'd probably assume somebody accidentally leaned on their keyboard. But no, in 1996, Brady Anderson, a leadoff hitter who had never hit more than 21 home runs in a season, suddenly hit 50. So, where in the world did that come from? And before everybody starts yelling, the most obvious explanation at their television, yes, we are going to talk about steroids. But the actual story is a lot more interesting than simply looking at one bizarre number and declaring the case closed. Because Brady Anderson was already a really good baseball player. In 1992, 4 years before the 50 home run season, Anderson hit 21 home runs and stole 53 bases. He became an all-star. He got on base, he had speed, he had some pop, and by 1995 he was coming off a season with a .371 on base percentage, 33 doubles, 10 triples, 16 homers, and 26 steals. So this wasn't some light-hitting utility player waking up one morning as Mark McGwire. But 50? Yeah, 50 was still ridiculous. And the weirdness started almost immediately. Anderson hit 11 home runs in April. At one point, he led off 4 consecutive games with a home run, something no major leaguer had done ever. By the All-Star break, he already had 30. Cal Ripken Jr. later described Anderson as a hitter who had always possessed a fly ball swing, but in 1996, he was suddenly square on everything, and it never really stopped. He finished at .297 batting average, .396 on base, .637 slugging, 50 home runs, 110 RBIs, and 21 stolen bases. His OPS was 134. His OPS plus was 156, and he led the American League with 92 extra base hits. Anderson's 50th homer came in the final game of the regular season, and fittingly, it was another leadoff homer. His 12th leadoff homer of the season. He had just completed one of the strangest great seasons in baseball history. But here's some context that usually disappears from the story. Baseball as a whole went completely nuts in 1996. Major league hitters combined for 4,962 home runs, which at the time was an MLB record. In 1995, the league had hit 4,081. So Anderson's explosion was extreme, but it happened during a massive league-wide power explosion. And Baltimore itself hit 257 home runs. This was not exactly the dead ball era, which brings us to the elephant in the clubhouse. Steroids. Anderson's season happened in the heart of what we now call the steroid era. He went from 16 homers to 50, and then never reached even 25 again. Of course, people became suspicious. Anderson has repeatedly denied using performance-enhancing drugs. More importantly, despite decades of speculation, no documented evidence has emerged tying him to PED use. That doesn't prove a negative, but it also means we shouldn't turn suspicion into a fact just because the stat line looks suspicious. Evidence over emotion works both ways. And there's another piece of the story. Anderson didn't suddenly start taking fitness seriously in 1996. He had been obsessive about conditioning, weight training, diet, and cross-training for years. He was an early user of creatine, which was legal, and Ripken later described him as ahead of the curve with things like plyometrics and nutrition. Again, none of that magically explains 50 home runs, but it does challenge the idea that Brady Anderson suddenly showed up in 1996 looking like he'd spent the winter training with Ivan Drago. Then came 1997. This is where the famous 50 to 18 drop needs context. During spring training, Anderson cracked a rib diving back into first base. He played anyway. For much of the first half, swinging hurt. At the All-Star break, he had only 7 home runs. As the injury improved, he hit 11 more in the second half and finished with 18. And despite the power disappearing, he still reached base at a .393 clip, made another All-Star team, and helped Baltimore win 98 games. So yes, the home run total collapsed. The player didn't. And 2 years later, at age 35, Anderson still produced 24 homers and 36 stolen bases. He just never came remotely close to 50 again. So, where did 50 come from? There's no single satisfying answer. Anderson already had legitimate power. He had always possessed a swing designed to put the ball in the air. He was fanatical about conditioning. He caught fire immediately and stayed hot for 6 months. And he did it during what was, at the time, the greatest home run season baseball had ever seen. Could people reasonably suspicious because of the era? Absolutely. Can we responsibly say Brady Anderson used steroids? No, the evidence isn't there. Maybe that's why 1996 remains so fascinating. Sometimes an outlier is just an outlier. And in Brady Anderson's case, it produced one of the strangest 50 home run seasons baseball has ever seen. Because the numbers tell part of the story, the context tells the rest.